Gloria Marsh came home from burying her sister and found the locks changed. She had been gone for 7 hours. 7 hours at St. Catherine's Church in Portland, sitting in the third pew with her hands folded, listening to the priest say things about Helen that Helen would have corrected. Helen was not a woman of great faith. Helen was a woman of great books. The eulogy should have mentioned her bookshop, should have mentioned the thousands of people who had walked into the velvet bookmark over 28 years and found exactly the book they didn't know they were looking for. But it didn't. The priest talked about duty and forgiveness and the mystery of God's timing. Gloria sat still through all of it, her eyes swollen, her purse clutched against her stomach, Helen's funeral prayer card creasing in her left hand. She had worn her black coat, the one Ray said made her look like a widow even before she was one. Now she was. The drive back took 4 hours. 4 hours through Oregon rain, past towns she had never visited, past forests of Douglas fir that looked like the end of the world. Her hands hurt from gripping the steering wheel so tightly. She didn't cry during the drive. She didn't cry when she got off the highway. She didn't cry when she turned onto Maple Street and saw her house, the white colonial that she and Ray had bought in 1992, the one she had painted 3 times because Ray kept changing his mind about the shutters. She pulled into the driveway at 6:47 in the evening, and the light was that particular color of gray that happens right before dark, the sky like old paper. She got out of the car and walked to the front door. She put her key in the lock. It didn't turn. She tried again. Turned the key the other direction. Nothing. She checked the key in her hand. Yes, this was the right key, the key she had been using for 31 years. She walked around to the side door. Same thing. The back door. Locked. All of it locked, as if the house had decided to reject her. She stood on the back patio, holding her purse, still wearing her black coat, and saw the envelope taped to the garage door. She didn't want to walk over to it. She stood for a long moment just looking at it, the white rectangle stark against the gray wood. Then she walked over and tore it down. Ray's handwriting. Not a letter, a single page printed from his lawyer's office. "Dear Gloria," it began. It explained that the marriage was dissolved as of 4:30 that afternoon. Ye that Ray had filed for divorce, that he had changed the locks for her protection in case she tried to take anything of value, that her personal effects had been boxed and were waiting for her at Storage Mart on Route 9, the joint account, the one she had deposited money into for 31 years, was closed. The house was his, the car was his, everything was his. The letter was signed by his attorney, Margaret's firm, and included a copy of the divorce filing, cold and clean and done. Ray had timed it perfectly. He had waited until she was 3 hours away at a funeral, until she was standing in a cemetery in Portland saying goodbye to her sister, until she was most powerless. Then he changed the locks. Gloria stood in the driveway holding the letter and Helen's funeral prayer card. She didn't scream. She didn't cry. And she didn't do any of the things a woman is supposed to do in this moment. Instead, she sat down on the porch step, the one Ray had always said he would fix, the one that had been rotting for 6 years, and she pulled out her phone and she called Helen's number. She didn't think about what she was doing. She just did it. The phone rang. Helen answered the way she always answered. "You've reached Helen. Leave me something worth reading." Gloria listened to the entire message, then hung up without leaving one. She sat on that porch step for another 20 minutes until the rain started again, harder this time, and then she got back in her car and drove to the airport motel. This is who Gloria used to be, an English teacher at Lincoln High School. She taught junior and senior year literature. She loved poetry. She loved the smell of rain on paper. She loved the moment when a student suddenly understood something about a poem, when the light came on in their eyes. She read at open mic nights at coffee shops in Portland. She wore red scarves and vintage dresses with patterns. She had a group of friends who met every Thursday night to drink wine and talk about books. Ray didn't like that group. Ray said they were too intellectual and made him feel stupid, so she stopped going. After a while, she stopped being invited. She stopped wearing the red scarves because Ray said they made her look too loud. She packed them away in a box in the attic. She stopped driving to Portland on Sunday afternoons to visit Helen at the bookshop because Ray needed her to be home, to be available, to sit with him while he watched the news. Helen called every Sunday night to check on her. "How are you, Gloria?" Helen would ask. "Are you happy?" And Gloria would say, "Yes, everything is fine." But everything wasn't fine. Gloria was disappearing. It happened so slowly that she didn't notice it at first. Then one day, she realized she had become small. She had become the kind of woman who asked permission to go to the grocery store. She had become the kind of woman who apologizes for her own sadness. She had become a woman her sister barely recognized. The motel room smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and the ghosts of 1,000 previous guests. The walls were beige. The bed was narrow. There was a window that looked onto the parking lot and the highway beyond. She lay on the bed in her black coat and stared at the ceiling. She didn't turn on the television, and she didn't look at her phone. She just stared upward and tried to understand how a person could lose everything in 7 hours, how a person could become invisible so thoroughly that the person she had shared a bed with for 3 decades could decide she was worth erasing. She had $340 in her personal checking account, the one Ray didn't know about. She had been taking $20 from the grocery budget for 30 years, depositing it secretly, building a wall between herself and complete destitution. It was $340. It might as well have been nothing. She called her daughter Lisa. "Mom, Dad says you've been difficult for years," Lisa said. "He says you've never supported his business. He says maybe this is better for everyone." Gloria hung up. She called her other daughter, Pam. Pam didn't answer. She never called back. Gloria lay on the motel bed and ate vending machine crackers and realized that she had spent 31 years building a marriage, raising 2 daughters, living a life that had decided to betray her completely. She thought about Helen, about Helen's bookshop on SE Hawthorne, about how Helen had always asked her to come visit, and Gloria had always said no because Ray needed her. Now Ray had freed her. Now she had nothing. She might as well go see Helen's bookshop one more time. It was the only place she could think of that still felt like something real. In the morning, she rode the bus to SE Hawthorne. The rain had stopped, but the streets were still wet, still gray, still unwelcoming. She walked down the block slowly, reading the shop names, watching the people pass. She turned a corner and there it was, the Velvet Bookmark. A small storefront with a dark green exterior, gold lettering on the window, stacks of books visible through the glass. A small awning over the door, still dripping from the rain. She stood on the sidewalk and looked at it the way a person might look at a grave. The closed sign was up. Of course it was. Helen had been dead for 2 months. Someone had to close the shop. Someone had to arrange the funeral. The bookshop had been sitting empty since then. She pressed her hand against the cold glass and tried to see inside. She could make out shapes, shelves, a reading lamp, the counter where Helen always sat with a cup of tea and a red pen. That was Helen's thing. She red-penned books. She read everything that came into the shop before she shelved it. She wrote in the margins. She made notes. She corrected grammar. She wrote recommendations. When a customer asked her for a book suggestion, she never just pointed to a shelf. She told them the story of the book. She told them who she thought it was for. She told them why it mattered. Gloria was about to leave when the door opened. "You must be Gloria." The woman was 62, maybe older. Auburn hair streaked with gray, cut short and practical. She wore a green corduroy apron over a cream Henley shirt. There was a pencil tucked behind her ear. She was holding a key, and she was looking at Gloria with the expression of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment for a very long time. "I'm June Whitfield. I worked here with Helen for 19 years. Helen told me you would come. She just didn't know when." June unlocked the door and held it open. "Come on inside." The smell hit Gloria first. Eat old paper and dust and ink and the particular scent of thousands of books pressed together on shelves. It was Helen's smell. Gloria had walked into this shop exactly 4 times in 28 years. This was her sister's life, and Gloria had barely been part of it. She followed June inside. The shop was small but full. Every wall was shelves. The shelves were packed tight. There were stacks of books on the floor, on the counter, on windowsills. There was a reading lamp in the corner with a worn leather armchair beside it. This was where Helen lived, not the apartment above the shop. This was where Helen actually lived, in the presence of other people's stories. "Helen told me to give you something when you came," June said. "She told me not a minute before and not a minute after. She said the timing had to be right. I have to say, the timing is very right." June led Gloria to the back of the shop, past the history section, past the cookbooks, to the mystery section, where the shelves were darker and older and lined with Agatha Christie and Ruth Ware and Mary Higgins Clark. "She built this about 6 years ago," June said. She reached behind a copy of And Then There Were None and pulled something. The entire bookshelf swung open like a door. Behind it, a hallway. A narrow hallway with light spilling from somewhere beyond. "Your sister," June said, handing Gloria a brass key, "was the most prepared woman I've ever known. She built this because she knew you would need it. She was right." Gloria took the key with a hand that was shaking. She didn't understand. She walked through the open bookshelf. The hallway was narrow and painted a soft cream color. And there was a door at the end, and the key fit it perfectly. She turned it. The door opened. Inside was an apartment. A real, full apartment. 1 bedroom, a small kitchen with white cabinets, and a window that looked onto a courtyard. A living room with a reading chair, and a lamp and bookshelves. But not ordinary bookshelves. These shelves were organized by author, and they were filled with Gloria's books. Every single book Gloria had ever mentioned, Lovin', Mary Oliver, Ocean Vuong, Sylvia Plath, Margaret Atwood, Jane Austen. These were the books Gloria talked about before she stopped talking about what she loved. These were the books that Helen had remembered. The books that Helen kept when Gloria forgot. There was a bed in the bedroom, a real bed with a quilt on top, the quilt their mother had sewn 40 years ago. There was a nightstand with a lamp. On the nightstand was a framed photograph. Gloria and Helen, ages 12 and 9, standing in their mother's garden, laughing. And there was an envelope, a thick envelope, with Gloria's name on it in Helen's handwriting. Gloria sat on the bed and opened the envelope. Inside were 4 pages of Helen's familiar looping cursive. She read them slowly, and then she read them again. "Dear Gloria, if you're reading this, then what I was afraid of finally happened. I watched Ray shrink you for 30 years. I watched you stop reading poetry. I watched you stop laughing at your own jokes. I watched you stop visiting me, and I knew it wasn't because you didn't want to. I built this apartment during the pandemic, when the shop was closed, and I had nothing but time and worry. I hired contractors who didn't ask questions. I furnished it with everything I know you love. The building, all of it, the shop, this apartment, the courtyard, all of it is in your name. I put it there 6 years ago when I was healthy enough to fight it through lawyers. You own this place, Gloria. Ray can't touch it. Your daughters can't touch it. It is yours. I know you'll feel guilty. Don't. I know you'll think you don't deserve it. You do. I know you'll want to call me and tell me I'm crazy. I wish you could. I love you. I always loved you the most. Helen. In the nightstand drawer she found the deed, a legal document with her maiden name, Gloria Ann Whitaker. She was the owner of this building. She was the owner of the velvet bookmark. She was the owner of this hidden apartment. She was, for the first time since she was 22 years old, the owner of her own life. Gloria held the deed and Helen's letter, and she cried. Not the polite tears she had learned to cry around Ray. Not the tears she cried at Helen's funeral, while the priest made the eulogy incomplete. She cried the way you cry when someone has spent years loving you from a distance, waiting for the moment you would finally need to know you were loved. She sat on the bed that Helen had made for her, under the quilt their mother had sewn, surrounded by the books Helen had remembered, and she let herself be found. June brought her tea. They sat at the small kitchen table and June told her everything. How Helen had been sick for the last 2 years. How Helen didn't tell Gloria because she knew Gloria would come, and Ray would punish her for leaving. How Helen had hired a carpenter named Miguel to build the hidden door, teaching him how to do it with videos and patience and detailed drawings. How Helen had spent the last 2 years of her life making sure this apartment was perfect, making sure Gloria would have a place that was hers. June told her that Helen had red-penned a note in every book on those shelves. Gloria pulled down a copy of Mary Oliver and opened it. There was Helen's familiar handwriting in the margin. This is the one that asks the right questions. Read this when you forget why poetry matters. June also told her that Helen had been broke when she died, that she had spent most of her savings on the apartment and the building, that she had worked in the bookshop without pay for the last 8 months because the shop didn't make enough money to pay both of them, that June had kept Helen's secret for 6 years, that she had been running the shop alone since Helen died, maintaining the apartment, keeping everything perfect, waiting for Gloria. She talked about you constantly, June said. Every day, she would shelve a book and pause and say, "My sister would love this." She was building this place and building it until it was exactly right. She wanted you to have a place that worked, a place where you could breathe. Gloria spent the first week in the apartment. She didn't go anywhere. She read Helen's letter every morning. She sat in the reading chair by the window and watched the rain on the courtyard garden, lavender and rosemary that Helen had planted, still alive, still growing. She walked through the bookshop when it was closed, touching the shelves, reading the red pen notes Helen had left behind. Every book was a conversation between two sisters separated by the life they lived and the love that had never stopped being there. By the second week, June started teaching her how to run the shop, how to order books, how to keep the inventory, how to speak to customers the way Helen did, with attention and care and the assumption that they knew exactly what they were looking for, even if they didn't know it yet. Gloria was terrible at first. She miscounted the register. She ordered 300 copies of a book no one wanted. She forgot to unlock the door one morning, and a line of customers waited for her in the cold. But then something shifted. She started reading every book that came in, just like Helen did. She started keeping Helen's red pen at the register. She started writing recommendations. She started remembering why she had been a teacher, because she loved the moment when you could put the right book into the right person's hands and watch their face change. 3 months into running the shop, Ray's lawyer sent a letter. The building was a marital asset. The divorce settlement would include the property. Gloria panicked. She had never dealt with lawyers. She didn't even have a lawyer. But Helen had anticipated this. Tucked into the deed folder was a business card for Margaret Chen, Helen's attorney, and a post-it note in Helen's handwriting. "Call Margaret. She's expecting you. Don't let him scare you." Margaret Chen explained that the property was in Gloria's maiden name. It had been transferred as a gift in 2020, 6 years ago. Ray had no claim. It was protected. Margaret also told Gloria that Helen had prepaid her legal fees for 1 year. "Your sister," Margaret said, "was the most prepared woman I've ever met." Ray's lawyer backed down. Ray called Gloria directly, which he had never done. "You can't run a bookshop," he said. "You don't know anything about business." Gloria hung up the phone. She fixed the porch step in the apartment, went to the hardware store on Division Street, bought wood filler and sandpaper and a can of weatherproof stain, and spent a Saturday afternoon on her knees doing work she had never done before. The step held. It was the first thing she had ever fixed with her own hands, and she stood looking at it for 10 minutes, feeling something she couldn't name. She planted new rosemary in the courtyard. She scrubbed the kitchen tiles until they shone. She learned how to bleed the radiator when it stopped working in November, watching a YouTube tutorial 3 times before she got it right. Water pouring into a bucket, her hands stained with rust. She bought a toolkit, a real one, not a decorative set, a heavy canvas bag with a claw hammer and a level and a tape measure, and hung it on the back of the apartment door where she could reach it. She hired Marco, a 16-year-old customer who was failing English and came into the shop every afternoon because it was the only quiet place he could find. He reminded her of her students, the ones who were smart but didn't know it yet, the ones who needed someone to hand them the right book at the right moment. She started tutoring him at the counter after closing, the way she used to tutor students after school. His grades went from D's to B's in 2 months. She hired him as her evening employee and paid him from the register. She started a Friday night poetry reading series. Open mic, anyone welcome, no judgment. 3 people came to the first one. June was one of them. The coffee roaster next door sent over free espresso. By the 3rd month, there were 40 people standing between the shelves on Friday nights, holding books and paper cups, listening to strangers read poems about love and loss and the things they couldn't say in daylight. Gloria read Mary Oliver, and her hands didn't shake. She read her own poetry, the poems she had written for Helen over the years and never shown anyone. And when she finished, someone in the back row wiped their eyes and said, "Thank you." She watched people walk into the Velvet Bookmark and find exactly the book they didn't know they were looking for. Her daughter Pam walked in one afternoon, crying. Ray had left her mother. His girlfriend Karen had taken the house. The marriage had dissolved the same way Gloria's had, without warning, without mercy. Pam said she was sorry. She said she had believed Ray. Gloria made her tea. She walked her through the bookshop. She didn't show her the apartment. Not that day. She just said, "Your Aunt Helen built this place because she loved me. She did it without telling me. She did it without needing me to thank her. She did it because sometimes love is just something you do, even when the person you love doesn't know it's happening." Pam came to the poetry reading on Friday. She brought a poem. She sat in the back and cried, and Gloria held her hand. Lisa didn't come, but Gloria wasn't waiting for Lisa anymore. She bought a red scarf. She wore it every day. She wore it when she unlocked the shop in the morning. She wore it while she shelved books. She wore it when she read poetry on Friday nights. The scarf meant that she was reclaiming something that Ray had taken. It meant that she was allowed to be bright, to be loud, to take up space. The scarf meant that she was not small anymore. A year after she found the apartment, she framed Helen's letter and hung it in her living room. She wrote her own letter and tucked it behind the bookshelf door, next to Helen's original plans and construction drawings. The letter said, "To whoever finds this place after me, my sister built this apartment because she loved me more than I loved myself. She did the work of loving me even when I couldn't see it. I kept this place because I finally understood what she was trying to say. This building is a home for people who need one. Keep the door open. Keep the Friday readings. And if someone walks in looking like they have nowhere else to go, make them tea and give them time." She signed it with her maiden name, Gloria Ann Whitaker. She planted a new rosemary bush in the courtyard, bigger than the first one. She started a program, a shelf by the door with free books, with a sign that said, "Take what you need, leave what you can." People left books and notes and bookmarks and sometimes cash. She used the cash to buy more free books. She created a scholarship for teenagers like Marco, who needed help with English. She named it the Helen Marsh Memorial Scholarship for Young Readers. She hired June full-time, even though June's knee hurt, because June had loved Helen, and June had kept the apartment perfect. The velvet bookmark became the kind of place that mattered in the neighborhood. Not just a shop, a gathering place, a living room for people who needed one. The retired teachers' book club met on Wednesday afternoons and argued about plot structure and drank too much tea and left crumbs on the counter that Gloria swept up without complaint. The local artist hung paintings on the walls between the shelves, watercolors of Portland in the rain, abstracts in deep blues and greens, and Gloria took 10% on sales and used the money to buy new shelving. A woman going through a divorce came in every Thursday and sat in the mystery section for 3 hours without buying anything, and Gloria brought her tea and sat with her sometimes without saying a word, because Gloria knew what it meant to need a place where no one asked you to explain yourself. The coffee roaster next door, a man named David, who had a beard down to his chest and roasted his own beans in a converted garage, started sending over free espresso on poetry nights and sometimes stayed to listen. He told Gloria once that the bookshop made the whole block better, that before Gloria, this stretch of Hawthorne had been losing its character. "You brought it back," he said. Gloria shook her head. "Helen brought it back," she said. "I just kept the door open. The local paper did a feature. It mentioned Helen. It mentioned Gloria. It called the Bookshop, the place where people come to find things they didn't know they were looking for." Gloria didn't correct them. That's exactly what it was. On a Friday night, about 18 months after she found the apartment, Gloria was closing up. She was wiping down the register. She was putting Helen's red pen in its place. She was turning off the lights. She paused at the bookshelf, the one that swung open like a door, the one that held the apartment where she lived now. She thought about Helen spending 6 years building an escape route for her sister, knowing she might not be alive to see it used, about love as preparation, about care as construction, about the way the people who love us most sometimes build us a door and we don't find it until we're ready to walk through it. She opened a copy of Mary Oliver, the poem Helen had red-penned. "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" Gloria had read that poem 1,000 times, But she had never understood it the way she understood it now. Now she was doing something with her life. Now she was running a bookshop. Now she was reading poetry. Now she was teaching people to love books. Now she was wearing a red scarf. Now she was alive in a way she hadn't been alive in 30 years. She pulled down another book from the shelf, one of her old teaching texts, Emily Dickinson. She opened to a page that Helen had marked with a yellow sticky. Hope is the thing with feathers that perches in the soul and sings the tune without the words and never stops at all. Helen had written in the margin, "This is what I'm doing for you. I'm building you hope. Hope is the apartment. Oh, hope is the bookshop. Hope is a door that opens when you're ready. The door will be there. Trust me." H. Gloria closed the book and held it against her chest. In another part of the city, Ray was living in a rented apartment with his girlfriend. His business was struggling. He had called his daughters asking for money, and they had said no. He had called Gloria, asking if she would help him, and she had said, "I'm sorry, I can't." She wasn't being cruel. She just couldn't anymore. Her energy was reserved for building, not for maintaining someone else's collapse. She turned off the light in the bookshop. She opened the hidden door. She walked through the hallway. She went into the apartment, her apartment, and sat in the reading chair by the window. She looked at the courtyard garden. The lavender was blooming. The rosemary was thick and full. The garden Helen had planted 6 years ago was alive and thriving. So was she. She thought about all the people who walked into the bookshop. She thought about the teenager who came in crying because he had lost his job, and she had recommended a book about resilience, and he came back 2 weeks later and said it changed the way he thought about failure. She thought about the woman who sat in the mystery section and read for 6 hours, just hiding from her life for a day. And Gloria had brought her tea and didn't ask questions. She thought about the old man who came every Tuesday and bought poetry books and talked about his dead wife. She thought about Marco, who was 19 now and applying to college for the first time. She thought about June, who was in the shop right now, drinking tea at the counter. Ib, who had been Helen's best friend and was now Gloria's best friend too. She picked up Helen's letter and read the last line one more time. "I love you. I always loved you the most." Gloria had come to understand that Helen loved her in the way that people love from a distance, in the way that requires patience and faith and the willingness to build something you might never see used. Helen had built a door and had died before her sister could find it, but that was okay. That was how love worked sometimes. You did the work, you built the door, you left the light on, and then you trusted that someone would walk through, eventually. And they did. Gloria opened her journal and started to write. She was writing the story of how she came home from a funeral with nothing, and walked into a bookshop and found everything. She was writing the story of her sister. She was writing so that someday, someone else would read it and understand that if you're sitting somewhere dark right now, waiting for permission to leave, waiting for someone to tell you it's okay, it's okay. Someone who loves you might be building you a door right now. You just have to be ready to walk through it when the time comes. She wrote until the lamp ran out of light. Then she sat in the darkness for a while, listening to the rain on the windows, listening to the sound of the bookshop settling beyond the hidden door, listening to the world outside the window. And she was at peace.